Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we're set to deliberate the latest developments here in Israel in particular, as well as the adjacent neighbors today, which is going to be the focus of discussions. But of course, we need to highlight today we mark day 504 since the atrocities of Hamas and the Islamist Palestinian terror groups in the Gaza Strip on October 7th of 2023. And yet again, yesterday they committed yet another atrocity, this time in the form of replacing the body of Shiri Bibas, the mother of baby Kfir, and his 4-year-old brother Ariel, who were transferred, of course, yesterday to Israel. They replaced Shiri with the body of a Palestinian woman this time. And on that and a couple of other issues that also were quite dramatic, let's turn to our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, explain to us all of this.
So, two major security and military-related stories of the day. The first one, starting yesterday morning and still ongoing, is what you just recounted. As per the agreement, Hamas was supposed to hand over yesterday the bodies of 4 Israelis who were abducted on October the 7th, 2023, and held by their captors. It turned out that only 3 of the 4 bodies who were transferred to Israeli custody were really those of Israelis. And all 3 of them have been murdered by their captors around November of 2023, several weeks after they have been abducted 15 months ago. That is the 83-year-old Oded Lifshitz, a farmer from Kibbutz near Oz, and the infants Ariel and Kfir Bibas. Their mother, Shiri, was also murdered in captivity, but rather than hand over her body to, as Hamas committed to do, they transferred an anonymous woman's body. Now, whether this is the result of chaos because the Bibas family was originally held by another splinter organization, Mujahideen, or whether they did not count on the Israeli forensic experts to find out that this is not Shiri Bibas, or perhaps they wanted to cover up what abuse she underwent in captivity. One doesn't know yet, but the facts are that Hamas did not stand up to its commitment. And of course, Israel demands that the Shiri Bibas body be returned. The other story has to do with a series of simultaneous terror acts, 4 to be exact. 3 were explosive charges which went off in buses in the Tel Aviv suburb of Bat Yam. The 4th one was found when the first 3 went off, and it was searched for in other buses. Apparently, it came out of Tulkarem in the West Bank, and the IDF has sealed several entrances from Israel proper to that area in order to catch the perpetrators. Some Israelis, a couple of Israeli Jews, were arrested on suspicion that they drove the perpetrators. Whether knowingly or unknowingly, there are such taxi drivers and others who sometimes smuggle Palestinians they should and could suspect were, of course, about to perform some criminal or terror act, but nevertheless do it for the money. 3 army battalions have reinforced the Judea and Samaria division, and counter-terror operations are still going on in the area.
Indeed. Well, let's now turn to central Israel, where we're joined by Brigadier General in Reserve Redik Shafir, formerly an Israeli Air Force commander as well as a fighter pilot. It's good to see you, General. I'd like to ask you about the former discussion point about Shiri Bibas. Naturally, the assumption is that she was indeed murdered back in November, but there are no evidence or there's no data to corroborate that at this point in time. And I'd like to ask you, how does Israel intend to act in light of this belligerent and really blatant violation of the outline? At a time when, of course, we do want to see all the hostages returned, but at the same time, it seemingly is a scenario in which Hamas keeps on lying, keeps on deceiving, claims to make mistakes every time it doesn't fall into line with its own public image or interests. But all in all, it seems to be the living up to the definition of what it actually is, a terrorist organization.
I think even though it may boil your blood, so to speak, to hear of this, we shouldn't be swayed by these acts, whether they are on purpose or whether it's just an occurrence that could take place because those who had held Shiri and the kids were a splinter group, the Mujahideen, who probably don't have the ability to identify or through DNA or any other manner in mass graves where they probably took them out of who is who. So all these should be taken into account. I think we should bite our lips or bite the bullet and continue. Tomorrow, there are live hostages who are going to be released. And I think we should just grit our teeth and continue and not make a scene out of every little change or every little occurrence as such. Of course, Israel can stop some of the flow of humanitarian aid coming into Gaza, but I don't think both sides have a reason at this time to cause any delays in the planned program to end the phase A of the agreement. So I would sadly say that at this time we can let off some steam and continue ahead.
About not allowing to be, or that we shouldn't be angered by it, or I am infuriated. Of course, as Colin Powell used to say in his 13 Rules, get angry and then get over it. But nonetheless, there are going to be consequences to these actions. Hamas is well aware of that. And it should happen at a time of place of a calculated manner to ensure that Israel's national security interests are kept at heart. But when we're talking at this, I mean, you know, we're not dealing with normal individuals who are peace-loving or any type of those parameters that you can actually have a candid conversation with and expect it to be in good faith. But let's turn elsewhere in central Israel, where we're joined by Colonel in Reserve, Reuven Ben Shalom, formerly a pilot at the Air Force, but also currently a cross-cultural strategist, among others. It's good to see you, Colonel. I'd like to hear your take on this. To what degree does the IDF need to deepen the various pressures that it can apply on the Islamist Hamas? I do agree with General Shafir when we're talking about the necessity to continue, at least to push through for this first phase. But I honestly, I don't see how we can translate a first phase into a second phase when Israel demands that Hamas exits the Gaza Strip and does not maintain its rule over it, while at the same time Hamas demands an end to the war and, of course, rejects leaving the Gaza Strip. Uh, make some sense to us.
It's a bit difficult to make sense of all of this, but I think I totally agree with General Shafir, and maybe I want to interpret some of the things that he said. It's my understanding that public sentiments in Israel, as you can see in social networks, etc., in the media and rhetoric by politicians, sort of takes us all in a certain vector that makes it almost as if, well, now we have to do something, or this shows their true face, and now there's no choice but to do such and such. And this, of course, is wrong. Such instance does not change the strategy. I'll connect, by the way, these two horrible things that we're discussing, the misplaced body of Shiri Bibas and the terror attack that was not thwarted yesterday, but we were just lucky. And both things are an instance that in a way could change the grand strategy if you go with sentiments, if you go with public opinion. For instance, when these bombs went off yesterday, and by the way, we should calculate this as if it happened. Just imagine that yesterday we had several buses that blew up, dozens of Israelis killed. In a way, we could have had our little 7th of October yesterday, and we would all ask, where were we? How did this happen? How did this? We thought we were fail safe, that we had a good security apparatus. We can't let this make us change course. We understand that who we're fighting. We understand the dangers. We thwart hundreds of terror acts on the way, and some of them get through. And yesterday, some of them almost got through. As far as Hamas and Gaza, it's the same thing. We understand how they operate. We see everything that they do for propaganda, and I will just assume that what happened now is on purpose, even though we must admit it could have been an error. But let's assume it's on purpose. What's the big surprise? As I already said on your program, Jonathan, an organization that can behead babies can also lie and switch a body and then watch and enjoy how Israelis, like General Shafir said, their blood boils and they demand their government to do things, maybe to do things that the terror organization wants us to do. So we all have to be very careful, very calculated. The way we're speaking now, by the way, is very sensitive, even in Israel. I would think twice before discussing things like this with my Israeli friends, because it's almost like you're expected to be in a certain way. As far as what we need to do in both places, I'll just say that in Judea and Samaria, things that are even done now are in a way to show that we are doing, because it's not like we didn't know there's terrorism and, oh, now we're going to step up operations. So yeah, you can send a couple more battalions. The Minister of Defense will issue a notice to the IDF to step up operations, as if yesterday we didn't step up operations. We're doing the best we can. Okay, so it's not like there's going to be a shift. The same thing in Gaza. We have to stay the course. Tomorrow we're supposed to get 6 live hostages. What an amazing thing this is going to be tomorrow. Another step, next week, more bodies. As far as phase 2, that's a broader issue. I don't think this is going to change the overall calculus, but certainly it's questionable whether this government will move forward with phase 2, certainly if the demand on the other side is something that we could not adhere to, such as end the war, promise that the war will not resume, and even have guarantees by the mediators. So stay the course. Don't let tactical things change your grand strategy.
When we're talking about the explosives that detonated last night, roughly at around 8:30 p.m., they were rigged. The IEDs, basically, improvised explosive devices. They were rigged with a timer on them and were supposed to explode this morning. By the way, Mr. Oren, you might correct me if I'm wrong, but the initial reports were 4 buses, and they found also one on the train, which was then dismantled by a bomb disposal team. Is that correct?
Well, the reports were sketchy because some of the security cameras were immediately searched for content. It seemed as if the perpetrator or one of the perpetrators ran from the depot where the first bus stopped its route into an adjacent light rail station and perhaps on board the train. This was not verified, but if you look at the security footage from the first bus, you can see that the perpetrator did not even pay for the ride. So if he's caught, obviously he's going to be charged for that too. Now, the watchword should be reversible versus irreversible. Live hostages should be returned as soon as possible. Of course, Israel will have to pay, perhaps by a declaration of an end to war and a withdrawal from Gaza, because their lives are irreversible. If they are being kept there much longer, they will perish, either because of what will become natural causes after such a long time, or because their captors will murder them, just as they murdered the Bibas family and Oded Lifshitz. However, a withdrawal and an end to war, these are reversible actions. If there is a cause, such as last night's terror spree, imagine that it didn't take place on February the 20th, but rather on April the 20th. 2 months from now, a few weeks after all the hostages have been returned and the war was declared over. This, and you have found that the terror acts were guided from or inspired by Hamas from Gaza. Then Israel would have been justified in raiding Gaza again. So the priority should be on getting the hostages back.
The priority is on getting the hostages back, but not at every expense. And that is something that is difficult to say. It's not popular to say either. But nonetheless, Israel's national security interests are a top priority also for the long run. So we do need to find that balance there. And there is no right answer in this context. There is timing for every circumstance. There is dealing with different circumstances. Colonel Ben Shalom noted that we need to treat those bombs that were detonated yesterday as if they were successful in perpetrating. But we need to remember that during the course of 2025 alone, for the last 2 months, we had 150 separate instances in which the ISA thwarted concrete explosive devices, shooting attacks, even suicide attacks in Israeli territory. And therefore, we're talking here about 2 to 3 such incidents a day that Israel's security establishment is successfully thwarting. Unfortunately, this is not hermetic, as we know. Security arrangements are never hermetic. But nonetheless, the necessity to calculate and to make sure that everything goes according to a certain strategy, with concrete tactics, is something that Jerusalem's leaders need to take into account, as well as the defense establishment and such. But nonetheless, General Shafir, not everything is reversible, and circumstances around the region, around the world, could force Israel to bring the war to a standstill if indeed the circumstances demand it. And that is something Jerusalem wants, and within the current circumstances of strategic successes, needs to avoid.
Well, you know that Trump's idea of relocating the Gazan population had spurred the Arab world into proposing an idea of their own, which they're formulating at this time, And I think they'll have a conclusive pan-Arabic meeting at the beginning of March, whereby Egypt, at least at this time, is taking the lead in overtaking responsibility in Gaza in a manner that the control of Gaza will be something like a Palestinian Authority alongside some Arab countries who will actually do the administrative control of Gaza, with Hamas, at least that's the way it looks now, receding in a way to a more quiet or less provocative position in order to retain their capabilities in Gaza in some manner. If this is put forward and Steve Witkoff is convinced that this is doable, then Israel will have a problem going against it, as we did not offer any day after solution to Gaza and jumped on the Trump train of relocation, which I don't think he meant it seriously, but wanted to spur the Arab world into coming forward with some solutions. So at least at this time, their solution is 20 billion Saudi dollars, and not removing or not relocating the Gazans and doing some work. We'll have to see what the plan is. This may force the Israeli ultra-right to stay in the government, as there is no other alternative, may not be other alternative, but to accept the Egyptian offer. We'll have to see how this transcends, but certainly the government itself, unless pressured by the United States, will not agree to go to the second phase, stop the war, and actually get out of Gaza without promising that Hamas is totally subdued. That remains to be seen.
When we're talking about the Egyptians, their plan was ready already in November of 2024. Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati traveled to Washington with the plan in hand, during the course of which the Americans basically rejected it outright. So they returned to the region. That's also one of the reasons that President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi decided to postpone his trip to Washington for a meeting with President Trump. And they are expected to have a meeting on the 26th, if I'm not mistaken, in Cairo with the Arab League, during the course of which they're going to deliberate new proposals for a amended plan. Of course, the Arab world is keen on maintaining the Arabs living in Gaza there for the sake of, quote unquote, keeping the Palestinian cause alive. They believe that if they are transferred out for any purpose, the Palestinian cause would come to a bitter end. But Colonel Ben Shalom, I'd like to hear your take on the Egyptian angle, since in 3 separate stages they have deployed troops into the Sinai Peninsula, which breaches basically the peace treaty between Jerusalem and Cairo. The first time was when they were confronting Ansar Beit al-Maqdis, that then turned into violates, or the Islamic State in the northern Sinai Peninsula. They have established their large contingent of forces to deal with that. Next to another deployment that occurred at the start of the war, when Hamas launched its atrocities on October 7th of 23. And then, since Trump's plan was announced, there was another deployment also located in a strategic position to signal Israel and America that they will not accept the displacement of Palestinians to Egyptian territory, at least. Of course, other territories, that's none of their business. But nonetheless, what can you tell us about that? And if you can do that in under 2 minutes, I'll appreciate it.
The Egyptian issue, for some reason, turned into like a hot potato now in Israel. And if you ask me my personal opinion, and I stress personal opinion because you know where I was for 500 days, is that this is sort of a spin. Something's going on here, and I'm not sure I totally understand it. In general, we have a strategic peace agreement with Egypt, bearing wonderful fruit. We have great cooperation and even collaboration on a variety of topics, and we see eye to eye regional stability. And in recent weeks, there's been a lot of talk about Egyptian deployments, making it sound as if Israel should suddenly be aware of some Egyptian plot or perhaps turning them into a future rival. I'm not sure where all of this comes from. At least from what I see and from what I know of no such vector. And I think the Egyptians are looking out for their interests. And I think this peace agreement is one of the most amazing things that happens in history and still successful until this day. And I think we'll also see great fruit during this war, the fruit of this cooperation that greatly benefits Israel. So I think this spin should be analyzed and put aside. As far as their interest in not wanting refugees, I understand them. That's their policy, that's their interest, and I can't even criticize that. So in general, very positive view on the relationship with Egypt. It's not like I'm being a diplomat and keeping the truth away from you. I'm telling you what I see to be the truth. As far as where the agreement goes and having the Egyptians in this, I think the main issue is the Palestinian Authority, the difficulty of the Israeli government to accept the Palestinian Authority as an entity that will be relevant. That's a political issue, a little bit different than my own views, but we at least have to understand that that is the hot issue that's maybe problematic for the Israeli government now and the direction that Egypt is taking. I didn't count 2 minutes, Jonathan, but that's what I have on this issue.
You were pretty much there. I will note, first of all, obviously, we're not going to speak about where you were for 500 days, but it's relevant, naturally. And when we're talking about the Palestinian Authority, I think it also has to do with capabilities. If they cannot bring about the aspired outcome as requested by the Europeans and the Americans, let alone Israel, with regard to northern Samaria, how can they succeed in the Gaza Strip where they are even less capable? So those are questions that need to be asked. But nonetheless, this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to immediately thank Colonel Ben Shalom, General Shafir, and Mr. Oren for all of your insights. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem, wishing you a Shabbat Shalom. For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at TV7israelnews.com.